Welcome to Pokerface.
Hello, David.
So great to be here, Yvonne. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. David, one of the first things that I want to know about you is how does a guy in Dublin, in Ireland, makes poker his life? Because you're an all-around poker player, poker commentator of live tables, and writer.
These days, it's much more diffuse, but at the beginning, I was just an online poker player, and that mostly came from enjoying playing poker as a kid, for sure. But the big moment was just after college. I studied philosophy and then screenwriting, and I wanted to be a screenwriter. And the main character in a TV show that was commissioned was a poker player. And I thought, to do justice to this character, I better understand his world a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I started playing a little bit of online poker, going to the local casino maybe once a week. And by the end of maybe a 6 or 9 month process, delving into this character, writing for him, the show was cancelled. I had no job anymore, but the one thing I had learned was how to play poker at a decent level, actually, already. The standard probably wasn't great back then. This is like maybe 2006. So I became a decent poker player. I thought, well, until I get my next writing gig, I'm going to have to make some money. Maybe I can make enough from poker just to tide me over. And that has snowballed into an 18-year career now.
Which you've done, because only online, you're almost at $1 million mark. So that's pretty considerable, and it's quite a distinct story, right? It's not everyone that can jump in online poker and actually make money. What do you think, and how did you transition from online poker then to live poker as well?
That was a move that took place sort of gradually. I had a kind of an outlier result. I won a satellite to the Full Tilt España series in 2009, went off to Barcelona. They gave you like maybe $600 spending money or whatever it was. And I had this idea, I want to bring my friends. So rather than go to a nice hotel for 3 days, I got maybe like this crappy apartment for 5 days, but it had 3 bedrooms, and a load of friends came with me, and we just thought it would be a holiday. I didn't really have any expectations for the tournament. And I ended up chopping that tournament for what is still, shamefully, my biggest score in poker. So
over 60,000 euros, your biggest score in Barcelona.
Correct. Yeah, it was actually 80,000, but we did a deal at the end, but the deal never went on the Hendon Mob, which is obviously fine. I think Full Tilt were very, at the time, they wanted you to hold up your fancy novelty check, and they have the integrity of their 100k winner remain. But we did do a deal on that one. So I did actually walk away with 80 grand, which tripled my bankroll at the time and allowed me to play much bigger games online. I didn't really attack live poker after that. I kept playing online for a couple more years. And it was only when I moved back to Ireland in 2011 that I started playing more live poker. And I suppose these days it's probably half live poker, half online.
Yes, and it's so interesting to see you at the live tables. I've been playing with you on 1 or 2 occasions, even more.
Much more, I think. Yeah, we've battled many times. I think you've always got the best of me.
Mm-hmm. And what I find also great about you is that you don't take any nonsense at the tables. Tell me a little bit, what has gotten you into trouble lately? Being so verbal, and how's the scene? How's the temperature?
I have a feeling you're referring to one particular incident in Barcelona a few weeks ago where I was a little bit petulant. This is not good, because there's a version of what you said which is good, which is that poker players should sort of police the game a little bit and, you know, make sure people are behaving themselves and whatever. And a little bit of influence from the maybe more veteran or grizzled players is good on that front. This wasn't a good example. This was actually an example of me being tilted and not showing my best self. But what happened was, I was at a table with a guy all morning. We were playing that. You have this in your tournament as well, Yvonne, a kind of a turbo flight, the last chance. Basically, it means you've done your bollocks in loads of bullets over maybe 3 starting flights, not got through, and now you find yourself at 10 a.m. in the morning playing this.
The tension is on.
Yeah, and this is your only chance to stay in this big tournament that you've traveled for. So I'm in that tournament and I'm playing with this guy, and he's just very, very rude. He's an Italian chap, and I love the sort of passionate guys who like to celebrate their wins. I never never really take it up with those guys if they're sort of chest pumping, because I just think that's their way of celebrating and enjoying the moment. But this guy was like slamming cards down in front of me physically, and when he showed a bluff to somebody else, he threw the cards across the table and just showed the bluff at somebody, which again, it's fine to show a bluff, but just like turn over your hand. You don't have to throw the cards at somebody. So we all bag our chips. We get moved to our, day 2 table, which is actually just later the same day. I show up, and sure enough, he's in exactly the same seat. He's exactly where he had been all morning. So I was already wound up by this guy, and he bluffed me. He took a kind of a weird line, as he's entitled to do. And on the river, he bets, and I actually had a misdraw, so I just fold, and he slams the cards down right in front of me, like on my side of the table, and I just sort of picked them up and threw them straight. Which is not to be recommended. It is not a good behaviour. But I was so wound up at that point, and I actually did receive a 1 orbit penalty, which I think was harsh. But I think getting a slap on the wrist was probably acceptable. Thank you for bringing up my more scandalous moments. Appreciate that.
Is this just to relax a little bit and talk about the fun part of poker? Because it's a really fun game indeed. And I guess I'm talking about this because I find it fascinating to understand how a professional poker player, after perhaps having a downswing time, losing, how on earth can you do that? And does writing help you with that? Is it like also interesting to have that alley writing about poker instead of sometimes playing or taking a good time off when you need it?
So I would answer that question 2 ways. Firstly, the first 10 years of my poker career, the only money I made was money I won at the poker table, either online or live. And it was a very different experience to my life now, I have to say. So for those 10 years, and all poker players will relate to this, if you're having a downswing, which you are, like 8-9 months of the year, you feel like you're in some form of a downswing. Maybe it's not a terrible one yet, but as soon as it starts getting to that sort of pain point, which again, everybody is maybe always pushing their threshold for pain. So I remember so many occasions where even the first night I lost $500 in a day, I remember being like, oh my God, that's like half my rent money. What was I thinking? What was I doing? And then $500 is nothing, and then it's 1,000, and you're like, oh, that's 1,000. And until that sort of point reaches, like where you can lose a 5k buy-in in a day, or things like that, or a very big Sunday could be easily 5 or 6 grand as well. And you could nearly brick a Sunday. That wouldn't be that unusual. It hurts, and when that downswing becomes 30k, 40k, I had this kind of mental trick I used to do, because I always got out of the downswing eventually. I'd be in the shower, and I would just be letting the water hit me in the shower, and I would be thinking of how shit I felt. And then I would think to myself, no, remember the shower after you got out of the last one. That will happen again. This will be a moment. And it was almost like through the same physical space, I was able to sort of, get back on the horse the next day and kind of do it. And sure enough, I would get out of the downswing eventually. And then I would remember, okay, so you got out of it again, so it's fine. So I used to do these kind of psychological tricks on myself as I would push my thresholds. These days, it's very different, because I make money as an ambassador, because I make money as a commentator, as a writer, because there are these other forms of income which are guaranteed, if you like. The pressure on my playing is not the same. So if I'm in a downswing, I'm not sure I even notice it to the same degree anymore, because some money has come in that month from other sources, and I've gotten pride out of other aspects of my life. I've written a nice article that people seem to like. I have a commentary gig coming up next week in Cyprus, which I'm really looking forward to. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be commentating the Irish Open. That's something I'm very much looking forward to. And these kinds of things become moments that you can kind of hold on to as sort of prideful moments, or moments where you feel like your value or your worth exists outside of playing. Because when you're only playing, there is that sort of danger or sense that, all your worth is in your bankroll, or in your, how the last session went, or how you're going at the moment. And that can then feel terrible. You can feel like not nice as a person when you're downswinging. So,
and it's so
different.
results oriented.
Yeah.
Right? It lacks a little bit of respect to the process in that way, being, for example, a tournament player where only 15% of the field goes ITM in the money,
Mm-hmm.
So, particularly interested that you experienced that, and now you're a much more all-around person in the industry. And your live commentating is brilliant as well, and we all love it. And what would you give as a piece of advice to someone that wants to get in the poker world, as you are, as an industrious person, as a person behind the scenes as well as a player?
If it was specifically commentary, and actually I've had a few people come to me on this, which is nice because I don't think of myself as a veteran commentator by any means. I don't do a lot of it. But for Unibet Opens, obviously when we had those, I did a fair amount. Irish Open, Merit over in Cyprus. I did the UK IPT last year. And then what was a really nice feather in my cap was the World Championship in December. I got to go over to the Win. You were there, I know. The Win is obviously the best place to go in Vegas, and they host the WPT World Championship. And when I wasn't playing and when I eventually busted the tournament, I got to go commentate on like the penultimate day, the final day of the Prime Side event. And that was sort of the big leagues. For me, that felt like a jump up in sort of quality of the stream. Actually, the same guys, it was share hands, so it was the same people I used to work with on other streams, and they're just brilliant anyway, whether they're doing a smaller event or a Triton. But it felt bigger for me because it was obviously a more prestigious event. And I think I did a good job. So
You did an amazing job.
but now I have people actually asking me for advice on that stuff, to come to your question. And what I definitely say to commentators is initially you can maybe feel an onus to want to seem clever. That's important. Like part of your job is you're the clever person in the room. You're the clever voice. And I think that's a big mistake, actually. What you're really trying to do is go on the journey with the players. And if you can sort of tap into their hopes and dreams or needs, if it's a professional player and, you know, they misplay a hand in your opinion, I think that's fair game to sort of question the line they took. And that's all part of it. But if they're an amateur player, if they're a recreational player who's having a sun run and they're going deep in the tournament, almost like thinking of, oh, well, maybe their mum or dad are watching the stream or their brother. And maybe they think that this hobby of theirs is not necessarily a great hobby to play poker. But this is their big moment to sort of prove that it's a great thing and they can actually make a bit of money doing it too. And I try to sort of see their journey through those eyes and get on that wavelength as well. Be a bit more generous in the commentary and and resist that urge to be a smarty pants, if that makes sense.
Well, you're a storyteller. This is when I can see that your whole work as an author permeates also in the commentary, in your poker play, in your passion about the game in general. Tell us a little bit, how do you see the poker industry right now? How's the landscape looking in terms of online? Like give us a little brush into that.
It's a mess, to be honest. There's no other way of putting it. I think live has never been better. Events like your own, Yvonne, obviously break records every single year. Clearly, there's a huge hunger and appetite for great live events. I think that price point around 500 or $1,000 seems to be a real sweet spot in Europe. Those are the kind of events that get really big fields. And I think maybe there's also a generation of online players who have lost faith in live and are now have lost faith in online and are now playing more live. Because that's where they feel safer. That's where they feel like there's bigger edges to be had. Maybe they're getting older and just, you know, a bit of carpal tunnel syndrome. Maybe they can't online multi-table. I certainly know I used to 40 table, and now when I get up to like 24, my wrists start going. I'm a bit distracted. So I think that's part of it. But to answer your more important question, which is about the landscape, online poker is a mess right now. And I have spoken about this quite a bit in my articles and whenever anyone gives me the chance, because it upsets me, to be frank. A lot of the operators, some of them are really big ones, and some of them are these sort of cryptocurrency legal adjacent apps that we now see everywhere in the poker world, and they have agents who will pester your DMs and your inboxes on Facebook to try and get you to play in their club because it's great and the player is really soft and you should join them. And so much of poker has gone there. And the problem with that is, if poker is relying on an agent system, in other words, there's a kind of a club app that someone is transferring the value of a fictional dollar in that app to a real dollar in the real world, and they're doing the transactions. Well, then they're basically the bank. So you're relying on that human being, not a poker site that has to, you know, go through all the regulatory stuff that poker sites do. You're relying on that person to be honest, and hopefully they are. But if they're not, you're fucked. They're going to just, run away with your money, and you will actually have no legal recourse in that situation. A lot of the kind of online apps that came, some of them were Asian facing initially, and they're now much more world facing, have grown so big, and they use that model still, and they bypass transaction fees, which I'm pretty sure is illegal in many countries. They certainly go around the jurisdictional issues of like UIGA is still obviously an ever-present thing in America. Loads of Americans are playing on these sites. Europe is ring fence. Loads of French and Italians are jumping into the same pool as the other people. This is a problem. I get the fact that we'd all like to go back 20 years to the heyday of online poker, where we all played together and the fields were huge and the prize pools were huge. But that's just not the realistic anymore. The regulatory landscape is just so different, and we have to stay legally within what we're supposed to do, or risk a Black Friday type incident happening again. 14 years ago to be exact, this happened, and people lost their money or had their money held for long periods of time, were left in limbo. Stars ultimately sort of made everyone whole, which was good to see, but they were at the time the worst offender in all of this. So I don't know, for me, I feel like we're on the precipice of another Black Friday type incident. I think the legal situation is not good. I think an industrious attorney, deputy attorney, ADA in the Southern District of New York could well be plotting another indictment of this type. I think that could be on the horizon, and I think if and when that happens, it's going to be sort of devastating for the online poker landscape.
It's important that players play in regulated as much as possible. I mean, if we are in a bit of an uncertain landscape, but there are some operators, including a Unibet, EvenBet, big platforms that are regulated. I mean, you can expect this kind of thing to be more controlled. So,
for sure. So if it's PokerStars, EvenBet, like you said, Unibet, 888, Party Poker these days certainly seem to be, pretty tidy in their operations. They're all following gambling laws in all the various different countries. They're probably observing if there's rules around how you can market, because obviously you can't market to younger people in some places, or you can't use younger people in your marketing in some places. You can't induce, if you like, customer behavior with incentives like free bets or things like that in certain places, or you can in others. So, it's up to marketeers in various districts to plot how they do that. But again, they're the kind of things you don't see some of these apps or some of these sites do. They're just running roughshod over that as well. So I agree with you. I think my advice to poker players these days is play on the regulated sites, do your homework, read up about what are the safer sites to play on, and confine your play to those if at all possible. If you decide you want to take your chances and play on these, I think, grey to black market sort of entities, then know the risks at least. If you're going to put your money on, maybe expect that your last deposit will never come back to you. Maybe expect that some big event is on the horizon and it could affect the money you have on there.
David, let's talk a little bit about your 20 years experience in the poker industry. What is your favorite anecdote at a live game?
Oh, wow. I do need time for this one. Sorry.
Take your time.
What's my favorite anecdote at a live tournament? Okay, so I'm actually, I have an idea. I'm actually writing a piece on this at the moment. I was playing in the Norwegian Poker Championships about 10 years ago. I didn't normally play cash games. That's not my thing. Obviously, I'm a tournament player, but the cash games at the Norwegian Championships are wild. So you sort of have to. That's where the money can be made on that week. So I was jumping into these cash games, and they were just off the hook kind of silliness. Everyone was drunk, obviously. You had to have a few drinks to sort of even be allowed to sit at the table with the guys. You had to straddle, probably had to double straddle sometimes. And yeah, it was just one of those kind of sloppy, fun, messy games. People obviously with deep pockets who were happy to reload. And I ended up in a pot with the guy who had seen me in a previous hand. I guess I had, bluffed and was called, and I just folded. A spot where I'm assuming I had not very much, and I think it was a very small pot. that was obviously in his memory banks, because we ended up in this really big pot where I had the nut flush straw, and I bet flop, bet turn, bet river. It bricked out. I did not hit the flush. So I'm bluffing on the river, and he calls, and I turn over my sort of ace 10 or whatever it was of hearts. And he just goes, I own you so bad. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Like, I'm just assuming he's going to roll over a bottom set or something now, or maybe a hero call with like pocket threes or whatever is making him feel good about life. He goes, I own you so bad here, you don't even understand it. And he shows over Jack High and said, I was so sure you were going to muck because the last time you bluffed, you mucked. I was sure you were bluffing, which he was right about, I was, but I wanted to see what he had. So this was a much more meaningful pot. This was like for, maybe $3,000 or something. So I turned my hand over, and now my hand on like ace high is good. Give me the thing. And I was like, I just won this pot because the guy literally called a $1,200 bet on the river on the off chance that I would muck my hand. Yeah. And I just thought,
isn't it a beautiful game? Look at the psychology it takes from that guy to think like, it's a very interesting deconstructive way of analyzing what was going on, right?
Yeah.
Like he saw your previous behavior, and then he thought he had you caged on that.
Yes, exactly.
And he just acts on.
Yeah, and ballsy from him, in fairness. Like he'd missed his straight draw, and he was sitting there with Jack High thinking, I think he's missed his flush draw, probably is what he put me on. And but he'll muck it. And I didn't. I rolled it over. And it was the winner. So send me that $3,000 pot. Thank you very much.
I am very scared of mucking hands because I've mucked the winning hand.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a very basic, I think it's a very classic beginner's mistake.
I also do that thing where when I have a bluff and like they're like it's 5 high, so it can't be good, like a bluff that cannot ever be good, I will slam it over almost like it's the winner, just to get the other person to think they lost for a second. It's kind of like a reverse slow roll. It's like a nice
reverse slow roll. Yeah. Incredible. So let's go back to writing. Where are you most prolific? In the kitchen, in a cafe, in your office, or in bed?
Is this writing, like where I do my writing?
Yes.
So my girlfriend is going to say that whichever of those I answer is wrong, because she would say it's in the bath, which is true. Either in a jacuzzi, in a health club, or in the bathtub is where I do a decent amount of writing. And that I know sounds fucking weird. There is a precedent. Dalton Trumbo used to bring his typewriter into the bath. So there is a famous writer who used to do something similar, but I am just there with my iPhone punching away.
Has it ever fallen into the bath or the pool or the jacuzzi?
Yeah, sure. There's been a few moments like that. Yeah. There's been a few. Yeah, it's only when it's attached to its power cords that you have to be worried about it in the bath context. I don't want to, that would be an awful way to kill yourself. It's just like, what happened? Well, he dropped his battery pack and iPhone into his bathtub, and we found him 6 hours later. No, I do. I think the coffee shop is probably the answer. The coffee shop or the bath are the two places. Or on a plane. The planes are great because you're shut off from everything else. Sitting on a Ryanair cheap flight to wherever I'm going for my next poker event, writing for those 3 hours. That could also be the place.
I'm curious. Who's your favorite poker player right now?
My favorite player?
Yes.
As in like person? Like as in...
It can be because it's a great player or a great person or, a combination. But your favorite successful poker pro?
I don't know if I have a favorite.
Top 3.
Well, obviously you would be there, Yvonne, unquestionably. But who are my favorite? I have friends in poker. I feel like there's a tricky one to answer because I don't want to offend any friends by not mentioning them, who are obviously my favorite people. But like, if it's kind of like the way people play, we interviewed Scott Seaver on the recent episode of the Chip Race, and that was a bit of a white whale for us getting a guest like him, because we wanted to get someone like him for quite a while. We had tried to get Eric Seidel for this special 10-year anniversary show that we put out, and Eric actually said he would consider doing it, which got us very excited. And then at the last minute said, actually, I don't want to do it, because he doesn't really do interviews, and he's said he would maybe make an exception for us, which was very nice, but then he didn't, which was very not nice. So we had very limited time to get somebody, and Scott almost immediately just said yes, which was brilliant. And he's definitely one of my favorites. I think watching him play live, he has that sort of ability to, it is reading people, but it's more than that. It's like reading the emotional wavelength of a situation. He's incredibly good at recognizing when people are feeling pressure, when people are more likely to take a more passive line.
That about him, I feel that he can read the table.
Totally.
Not necessarily and that I find so brave and courageous. That's a very courageous way of playing in a way, because it gives you this other element. It can be a much more relaxed game because you can see at the big picture.
No, I think that's completely right. So I think what he does is, and he described it actually in the interview to us, he said, because he's an emotional mess as a person himself, he decides that, well, all I can do then, I can't hide that fact that he wouldn't be good at hiding it. So he just puts it out on the table, but then feels like once he's put that sort of energy out there, he feels like he's very good at understanding how that energy will impact people. And I think the proof is in the pudding. He's one of the most successful players of all time. His 3 bracelets last summer, the first time he really ever bothered going after bracelets, because normally you'd find him in the high stakes cash games. So yeah, I think he's one of the game's greats and definitely one of the people I love watching play the most. He also plays all the games, which I think does, make you an all-round poker player. I think someone like me who dabbles in mixed games, but basically plays Hold'em and a bit of PLO, we're not really poker players. We're sort of specialists in one bit of poker. These guys are poker players.
Incredible. Yes, but you have heavyweights in your show, The Cheap Race. You had recently Jason Kuhn.
Yeah, Jason's a pal and has always, again, made a sort of exception for us. He doesn't really do interviews, but he has come on the show maybe 3 or 4 times over the years. And he's always a great interview, particularly the first interview we did with him, which was more, origin story. We kind of, you don't want to go back and delve into the same stuff again. So we only did that in the first interview. But his sort of, coming up in poker is, or even just his like teenage years and stuff is a very, very compelling story. It would be a movie for sure.
Yes. And I feel that Jason Kuhn sometimes doesn't give interviews because he doesn't want to reveal his strategy a little bit. Do you have that feeling that it's this kind of being a little bit shy or not so media prone? It's a way of also defending his game.
That's definitely true. No, you're absolutely right, because like when you're dealing with someone who has the knowledge that Jason has, and he's in a sort of a tight-knit circle with people like Nick Petrangelo, Stevie Chidwick, I'm sure there are others as well. But when that's their brain trust, like that's basically the best players in the world brain trust. So they're going to be understandably guarded about that information. That's the keys to the kingdom, if you like. If you got to sit on one of their sessions for like 2 hours, my goodness, the pearls of wisdom you would pick up, even things that would be applicable at a lower level as well. So I think,
Even racing, that's why I love live streaming. When you're watching a live stream, you learn so much. I would totally recommend it for those at home that want to delve in poker. I find it very entertaining. And that's how you get this poker wisdom from the way these guys play, right?
Yeah, you certainly get to see their hands. I guess like Triton streams is probably where all those guys go and battle each other, and they're the most compelling TV streams for me to watch for that reason. Is you just get to see the highest level of play, and then you get to figure out the why. You deconstruct it, you reverse engineer every hand, and that's the closest you're going to get to seeing why these guys do what they do. Very few of them coach, for example. Very few of them will, make training videos. So really, this is your only opportunity to see that. So it's very valuable. I think that's actually always been the way. When you look back to things like late night poker, not late night poker, more like high stakes poker or these kind of shows, Antonius, Ivy, Duan, they were all very guarded. Like we think about them as these great personalities because of their plays and because of these audacious bluffs, audacious calls, these, phenomenal sort of battles that they had on the felt live and online. But actually, when you think about it, they're very underexposed people. Phil Ivey, the same. These guys do not put themselves out there. Victor Blom, they're all very guarded people. They're all very private, and they didn't really give a lot away in terms of strategy, except for when you got to see the hands that they played. And I think that's always maybe been the case. I think there's a tendency to sort of look back and go, oh, this was the glory days of TV poker where, we had all these characters. Actually, when you look back, okay, there was probably a few characters dotted in amongst them, but most of them were quite shy, retired, privatized.
That's what the future holds. I believe there's a lot of young new players. I mean, let's talk about the Brazilian players, for example. The landscape is super fun. Young players, super savvy. They practice their game. They study their game, but with a young personality and a fresh component to the game. I love to see that. I'd love to see more shows now, actually, when technology is better, to do more effects, to making even more of a production.
Unfortunately, I have never played in Brazil. It's one of the places I would love to go and play. I'm aware of like the BSOP's history there, and I think it might have won an award this year as well for a best tour. I know you're having an event in Brazil coming up. Like, it's clearly a hotbed of poker. We all know it from online. The Brazilians are a big part of the online landscape when you're playing in the .com region. But I think maybe more than any other place, and anyone who I know who's been there testifies to this, it gets as close, or maybe closer even than the Brits would, to that sort of almost football culture on the rail. So let's say a final table, like I guess everybody knows each other. There's sort of, whether it's shoe bombs, I know that's what the Brits would be doing, but it's the football terrace sort of anthems, the singing, the joy around poker, which is actually kind of unusual. Like in Europe, okay, yeah, you'll go some places where it's really fun. Irish Open coming up, for example, is one of those events where there's a great atmosphere. But actually in a lot of poker rooms, and by the way, this is okay as well, it can be more subdued. It can be a little bit quieter. It can be a little bit more reserved. People are playing for a lot of money. They don't want it, screaming and roaring around them. But the Brazilians seem to love that. It seems to bring out the best in them. And I would expect any event in Brazil to, certainly be one that you want to have some TV cameras around as well.
So to wrap it up, David, what is your, and tell me the truth, what is your poker dream?
I think people might be surprised to hear that it's actually a playing goal. I have for a lot of years, I mentioned it earlier that it was still my biggest result, and that was like 14 years ago, whatever it was. I have sort of crossbarred, that's probably the right phrase, at least 20 major tournaments. And by crossbar, I mean I didn't even make final tables a lot of the time. I mean like last 2 tables of these 5,000 runner plus fields quite often.
That puts you in a 2%. So let's be generous with your game because it's very consistent.
For sure. No, I certainly think I have some game, and I think I've probably run well to get into those spots frequently enough each year. But I think I've run poorly once in those spots. And that's been a sort of a different form of variance, or a particularly crushing form of variance that's certainly in the back of my mind all the time these days. So yeah, while I'm a much more diverse person in poker these days with all these different ambitions and goals, I'd love to do more commentary. I'd love to, have my writing, read by more people or whatever. Actually, my poker dream would be to win a really big live tournament, because I haven't done that, and I really, really want to do that. And I feel like nobody deserves anything in poker. Obviously, huge fields, variance is massive. You can never go around with the chip on your shoulder feeling like you deserve things, but I'd really like it. It would be really nice if that happened.
Why am I not surprised to know that your poker dream is a playing dream, right? This is what's so fascinating about this game. We love this game. So I'm sure your big win will come, and we are here watching and admiring everything you do. Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you.
And thank you so much, Yvonne. Obviously, this is a fairly new endeavor, and I imagine it's going to go from strength to strength. I heard your first show with Robin Poker. He's a good pal of mine. I assumed at that point you were just choosing all the best looking people on the island and going through them one by one. And I don't mind being second to him, to be honest. That's okay.
Thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure to have you.
To